Welcome to the deep dive. We're digging into a really fascinating mix of sources you've shared today.
We are. It's a journey, really, connecting personal growth, ancient philosophy, some iconic Renaissance art.
And yeah, that very human side of things, creativity and rivalry.
Exactly. We've got personal reflections, thoughts on philosophy, what's actually new, and of course, a close look at Raphael's School of Athens.
Right. So our mission, as always, is to pull out the most insightful bits from this blend of ideas.
Should be interesting. Lots of connections to make.
Let's jump in. Okay, so the sources start, interestingly, with a personal reflection about processing conversations with friends, looking for traits you admire.
Yeah, and it brings up this idea of lifelong learning, maybe through a friend who acts kind of like a mentor.
And that personal angle quickly leads to, well, a word the source says is tricky to translate properly into English,
Right. The Azerbaijani word, Qibta.
Qibta. And the usual translations, like envy or jealousy, they don't really fit, according to the source.
Not quite. The source describes Qibta as something, well, healthy, almost naive, harmless wishful thinking.
Wishful thinking about someone else's good stuff, like achievements, talents.
Yeah, or their happiness, confidence, even possessions. But crucially, there's no ill will involved. It's pure admiration.
That seems like a really key distinction the source is making, because it contrasts it so sharply with jealousy or Hasad.
It does. Hasad is framed very differently, quoting the Quran, calling it a disease of soul.
A disease.
Yeah.
Wow. And the source says this can lead to other harmful things.
Yes, like backbiting, that's yubat, or making accusations, tomat. The idea is if someone feeling Hasad can't directly hurt the person they're jealous of.
They might try to damage their reputation instead, behind their back.
Exactly. It's destructive.
So the core difference the source points out, it's about what happens next, what you do with that feeling.
Precisely. Kiptoid that healthy admiration. It makes you want to do something positive, to achieve something similar, to embody those traits yourself.
Whereas jealousy, Hasad, it just kind of festers. It hides behind those hateful and sinful eyes, as the source puts it.
Yeah, it doesn't motivate positive action in the same way.
And this connects back to that personal philosophy mentioned. Admiring a trait in someone, asking yourself, would this make me a better person?
Right. A better father, maybe. And if yes, you try to work on it. If no, you just accept the person as they are. No resentment.
It's about self-improvement from observation, not envy.
And the friend mentioned Christos, noted as a fictionalized name, seems to embody this kind of learning from others.
Which leads us nicely into the next part,
Yeah.
because that conversation with Christos apparently sparked this whole exploration into philosophy.
It did. The source shares his perspective on Greek philosophy, calls the Golden Period really eye-opening,
But maybe not the easiest reading, line by line.
acknowledges it can be slightly boring that way. The key, according to this view, is grasping the main ideas and seeing them in their historical context.
Understand the big picture, not just every single word. Makes sense.
And then comes this pretty bold claim from the sources that in the West, arguably no significant new thoughts have really been added to what the Greek giants laid down 2,300 years ago.
Wow. Okay, that's a statement. Does the source define significant new thought?
It doesn't explicitly define significant, no, but the implication is about foundational concepts that later Western thought is mostly building on or reacting to those ancient Greek ideas.
So a focus on core ideas and context. That really resonates with trying to grasp complex stuff efficiently, and this philosophy chat led directly to mentioning a specific artwork.
Yes, the conversation turned to the famous fresco School of Athens.
Right, shifting from the ideas to how they were visualized, the artist being Raphael Sanzio.
Raphael Sanzio da Urbino, yeah. Urbino being his birthplace. And by his mid-20s, Raphael was already a big deal, a star painter, top of his game.
Which led to this massive commission, right? Pope Julius II calling him to Rome.
In 1509, yeah, to decorate rooms in the papal palace. And Raphael basically stayed in Rome for the rest of his life.
And getting that call from the Pope, that was the pinnacle for an artist then.
Absolutely. The ultimate validation, as the source notes.
Plus, Pope Julius II had his own agenda, didn't he? Wanted to one-up his predecessor.
That's right. He wanted his rooms to outshine the Borgia apartments downstairs, which had paintings from the early Renaissance.
But it was a big step up for Raphael.
Yeah.
He was young, hadn't done frescoes quite this complex before.
Correct. He was mostly known for smaller works at that point, so this was a major challenge.
And the source mentions his friend might have helped him get the gig.
Possibly, yeah. His friend Bramante, the architect for St. Peter's. They knew each other from Urbino, so Bramante might have put in a good word.
So Raphael takes it on, prepares meticulously, making these detailed sketches, blowing them up into full-scale cartoons for the fresco.
And crucially, he's doing this while another artistic giant is working nearby.
Ah, yes. Michelangelo, working on the Sistine Chapel ceiling at the same time.
Right. And the source suggests this wasn't just tension, but maybe even a motivator, that the competition pushed and inspired Raphael.
Interesting dynamic. Competition is fuel. So where exactly is the School of Athens located?
It's in the Stanza della Segnatura,
Oh.
one of 4 rooms Raphael decorated in the papal palace.
And this room, the Stanza della Segnatura, it was originally the Pope's library.
Exactly. Pope Julius II's private library, which explains the theme.
The theme being?
Knowledge. Each of the 4 walls represents a major branch of knowledge as understood in the Renaissance: theology, literature, justice, and philosophy.
So it connects to the room's purpose. The source mentions decorating libraries with portraits of thinkers was already a thing.
It was, yeah, in the 15th century. But Raphael took that idea and just exploded it into these huge, complex scenes, much more ambitious.
The goal being to visually represent the library's contents, impress visitors.
All of that. Balance the room, show off the Pope's intellect, and definitely spark conversation among the educated people who'd be in there.
And School of Athens, representing philosophy, wasn't the first one he did in that room.
No, it was the 3rd finished, according to the source, after Disputa for theology and Parnassus for literature.
And its placement matters too, right? Facing the theology fresco.
Yes, directly opposite Disputa, creating this deliberate contrast, this dialogue between religious faith on one side and lay or non-religious philosophy on the other.
Okay, let's zoom into the fresco itself. School of Athens. The source calls it an immense architectural illusion.
It really is. It's not just a collection of figures. Raphael painted this incredible architectural space. The whole thing serves to visualize an intellectual concept.
A lesson in the history of philosophy laid out visually through the groupings.
Precisely. And the source hints Raphael might have gotten a peek at Michelangelo's Sistine work, maybe through Bramante, and perhaps drawn some inspiration there too.
And he included contemporary faces among the ancient philosophers.
Yes, using portraits and modern influences for some figures, blending past and present.
So who are the absolute main players in the center?
Right at the vanishing point, under that big central arch, you can't miss them. Plato and Aristotle.
The teacher and the student. How are they shown?
Plato's on the left, depicted as older, pointing up to the sky.
Pointing up, okay.
And Aristotle, next to him, his student, has his right arm out, palm down, more towards the earth. They're holding books too. Plato has Timaeus, Aristotle his Nicomachean Ethics.
And these gestures, they mean something specific about their philosophies.
That's the common interpretation, yeah. Plato pointing up is thought to represent his theory of forms, the idea that the real world is this spiritual realm of perfect ideas, and our physical world is just an imperfect shadow.
The world of ideas. And Aristotle's gesture.
Pointing outwards, grounded. That represents his empiricism. The belief that knowledge comes from experience, from observing the physical world, needing concrete evidence.
So right there at the center, Raphael puts this fundamental split in Western thought. Idealism versus empiricism.
Exactly. Scholars argue that's the core theme, visualized right there. It's brilliant.
Beyond Plato and Aristotle, the source says, identifying everyone isn't always certain, but some key figures are pretty well agreed upon.
Yes, based on known portraits or attributes.
Like Socrates. Where is he?
He's to Plato's left. Recognizable by his features, maybe based on an old bust, and his hand gesture.
Ah, the source quotes Vasari on that gesture.
It does. Vasari wrote in Lives of the Artists, even the manner of reasoning of Socrates is expressed. He holds the forefinger of his left hand between that and the thumb of his right, and seems as if he was saying, you grant me this and this. He looks like he's counting off points in an argument.
You can picture it, and he's got students around him.
Yes, like Alcibiades and Aeschines of Sphetus.
Okay, who else? Down in the foreground, left side, Pythagoras.
That's him. Seated, with a book, inkwell, students around him. We know him for math, of course, but the source also mentions his belief in metempsychosis.
Metempsychosis, soul transmigration.
Right, the soul moving to a new body after death. His placement on Plato's side kind of fits, linking to those less material, more spiritual ideas.
And mirroring him on the other side, the right foreground.
That's Euclid, bent over, using a compass, demonstrating geometry to students who look really engaged.
Father of geometry. Very concrete. theorems, proofs.
Exactly. So he fits perfectly on Aristotle's side, representing knowledge from tangible methods. And there's that cool theory the source mentions.
That Euclid is actually a portrait of Raphael's friend.
Yeah, Bramante, the architect. It's widely believed.
That's fascinating. Okay, who else on that right side?
Next to Euclid, back-turned, yellow robe, holding a globe of the earth, that's Ptolemy.
The geographer and astronomer, and in front of him.
Bearded man with a celestial globe thought to be Zoroaster, another figure associated with astronomy or ancient wisdom.
And then squeezed in there.
Is Raphael himself, the young guy looking right out at us, the viewer, next to Zoroaster.
A self-portrait in this huge work full of history's greatest minds. Pretty bold.
Very bold. The source notes it wasn't his only self-portrait, but putting himself here. Yeah, that says something.
Okay, now for the really juicy part. The source brings up the human drama. The theory that Raphael didn't just paint friends, but rivals too.
Yes, this adds a whole other layer. It asks us to think about those artistic relationships. The main focus here is Michelangelo.
Right. The theory is he's in the painting as Heraclitus, the brooding figure down in the front.
That's the one. And importantly, the source stresses this wasn't a flattering depiction at all.
Unflattering. How so?
Well, Heraclitus was known as the weeping philosopher, often depicted as melancholic or obscure, and the figure looks quite isolated and maybe a bit grumpy. The source even links this potentially unflattering portrait to Michelangelo's constant accusations
That Raphael plagiarized him, which continued even after Raphael died.
Exactly. It suggests this might have been a major source of that friction.
Wow. Okay, but Michelangelo wasn't the only rival potentially depicted. What about Leonardo da Vinci?
This is maybe even more intriguing. The theory goes that Leonardo isn't just in the painting, he's depicted as Plato.
Wait, as Plato, one of the two central figures, using Leonardo's face.
That's the idea. Using da Vinci's recognizable features for the figure of Plato.
So, if true, Raphael paints one rival, Michelangelo, as a grumpy philosopher, and his other main rival, Leonardo, as the revered Plato, right at the heart of the whole thing.
Precisely. The source calls it irony, describes it as potentially genius and bold. Imagine being kind of sarcastic, maybe even funny, by elevating your competitor to this central, idealized role in a painting for the Pope.
That is audacious.
Yeah.
Certainly adds a layer of personality, maybe even artistic gamesmanship to the fresco.
It absolutely does. It reminds you these were real people with complex relationships.
Okay, let's shift to the end of Raphael's story. The source mentions his death was quite young, and the details are peculiar.
Very young, only 37. And yeah, the cause of death isn't totally clear. The sources mention conflicting theories.
Like what?
Syphilis is one theory mentioned. Another suggests a virus, maybe pneumonia or something similar. And then there's the account from his biographer, Vasari.
The more dramatic one?
Right. Vasari claimed it was exhaustion from overwork, combined with, well, having too much sex with his mistress, La Fornerina, whom Raphael painted, by the way.
Quite the story. What do we know for sure about his final days?
We know he got sick suddenly, was bedridden for about 15 days.
And he prepared for the end.
He did. Confessed his sins, dictated his will, received the last rites. He died on a Friday, April 6th, 1520.
And here's the really strange part the source highlights.
The date itself, April 6th, 1520. It was not only the day he died.
It was believed to be his birthday, too, born April 6, 1483.
Exactly. And on top of that, it was Good Friday that year.
Born and died on the same date, which was also Good Friday. That's a lot of coincidence.
It is, and the source actually draws a parallel here to another figure recently covered, Walter Russell.
Oh, right, who was also born and died on the same calendar day, May 19th.
Just one of those strange historical echoes.
So looking back, we've covered quite a bit. Started with that personal reflection on learning from others, that concept of Qibta.
Moved to accessing core philosophical ideas, seeing them visualized in Raphael's incredible School of Athens.
Unpack the painting itself, the key figures, the central debate between Plato and Aristotle.
And then dove into the human element, the potential rivalries with Michelangelo and Leonardo depicted right there in the fresco, and the unusual circumstances of Raphael's death.
It really shows how art and philosophy aren't separate boxes, are they? They're tangled up with history, ideas, and real human lives and relationships.
Absolutely. The painting reflects the intellectual debates and the personal dynamics of its time.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, here's a final thought drawn purely from the source material for you to consider. We heard the suggestion that the intense rivalry with Michelangelo might not have just created conflict, but maybe it also pushed and inspired Raphael.
Right. So what might that tell us about the relationship between competition and creativity? Can that friction actually fuel greatness? Something to think about.
Keep digging, keep making connections. Thanks for joining